I was actually going to ask, because I was curious, you were a Fortian, as they're known,
Yes.
from Fort Street High School. There are many, many lawyers who've come from there, and I wondered if perhaps your high school, Fort Street High School, had been in any way influential in your decision to do law, but clearly not?
No, clearly not, except in this respect. A boy 1 year ahead of me at school, I started in 1940, was a fellow called Bob Ellicott. And I formed a friendship with Bob, and I was always 1 year behind him. And he went into law 1 year ahead of me, and I was not, at that stage, a close friend of his as I later became. But nevertheless, I could see that Bob was enjoying the law, and I thought, well, if Bob likes it, this is another reason for me giving it a go. I wasn't particularly keen to be a school teacher. My father had, in fact, started life as a school teacher for 2 or 3 years before he trained for the Baptist ministry. So I suppose, but I wasn't really imbued with the idea of being a school teacher. But I don't think either of my 4 siblings really influenced what I did.
When you were at high school, of course, we were in the middle of the Second World War, and they were difficult years for would-be lawyers and certainly students. You went through Fort Street High School and then attended Sydney University, and you got a BA there, and also later on you got your Bachelor of Laws. Were there lecturers at Sydney University who might have been influential? You mentioned Bob Ellicott, of course, and his decision to do law, and that playing a little bit of a part in your decision to go into the legal profession. What about at Sydney University itself?
In the law school, you were right. I started law in 1947, and the effects of the war were still being experienced, including in the lecturing staff. In those days, as is now not the case, I believe, the majority of my lecturers were practising barristers. People like Bob Hope, in particular, Vernon Treat in criminal law, and in tutors, people like Harold Glass, and I think those people attracted me in the sense that they were good lecturers, they were practical. The more well-known person, of course, was Julius Stone, who was a delightful, attractive lecturer.
Very colourful, I'm told.
Yes, he would walk around the classroom. He was very friendly to me when I left the university, in the sense that I'm sure he just was partly because he knew I was going to the bar. He knew I was the associate to Justice Sugarman, who was a close friend of his, and he went out of his way, I'm sure, to make me some sort of scholar, whatever it is, at £250 a year to do some research on a book, help him write a book he was writing. And so I have a very fond memories of Julius Stone, and indeed Bernard Sugarman, who was the judge to whom I was associate. Shatwell, who was the dean, was a very unimpressive man, I thought. I don't mean legally, but he mumbled a bit, didn't have the charisma of Stone. Of course, Stone, I went to the law school. I'm not sure whether the fracas between Stone and I think the previous dean was called Williams. There was a very unpleasant, I don't know whether you know about this, but there was an internal fight in the law school staff. Some would say even that it might have had some overtone of anti-Semitism. I don't know that. I'm certainly not suggesting it. But Shatwell came in, as I remember, whilst I was a student. A nice man, but nowhere near the personality that Stone had. I think my course had been set. When I'd made a decision to do law, I don't think a lecturer was either going to persuade me to continue or persuade me not to continue, but so there it was. Yeah.
I'm just interested briefly regarding Julius Stone, Zena Sachs, who worked with him.
Zena.
Yes.
Yeah.
Did you encounter her at all? There were a few women, very few women, mind you, doing law in those days at Sydney University, but did you encounter her? She went on to work with him.
Only in the sense, as a secretary, I used to go and see the prof, and because he was so friendly with Bernard Sugarman, who was a Jew, and Julius was a Jew, I imagine Zeta was too, but Julius would frequently come across the road to the judge's chambers, and Zeta would bring me up and I'd speak to her about, little things like, is the judge free? So I had a continuing association with her, but I didn't go beyond that.